Yeah. All right, TJ Gausman and I are in a fight. So we had to bring Dave Kennedy from Fidelity Land Title onto this call. Hey, Dave.
Hey, how are you guys? Two of my favorites here.
Yeah, well, we'll see who's your favorite after this. All right. So here's the scenario. A
Okay.
buyer and seller agree to a purchase price. They're of a property. There's
Okay.
no bank involved, so essentially it's cash. But part of it's going to be actual like a wire transfer from the bank. The other part of it is going to be in a coin collection.
Okay.
First, Dave, before you say anything, TJ, what say you? Is this cool?
So yeah, this is real, by the way, which is insane to me because I thought this was like one of those crazy Mertland
Whose
hypotheticals.
music is this?
You hear music?
Is somebody's music? Is that mine?
You've got a mess on your hands over here today.
That was a good song.
I didn't even hear it. So I would think my initial reaction would be no, you can't do this.
Why?
Because I would think that the item, let's say a coin collection, would need to be sold between buyer and seller so that it's not a part of the transaction, so that everybody gets their taxes and then used as cash. That would be my initial thought.
Okay, I can understand your thought. Dave, hold your tongue for a minute. I can understand your thought. But in my head, it's like if the buyer and seller agree to a specific amount of compensation, and let's say the compensation is a yacht, $40 worth of Bitcoin, whatever, right? I mean, 3 goats and some cash. Why do I care? They agree. If everybody agrees to the value of all of those things and it equals the value that we are saying the property sold for, so you don't have any tax fraud, there's no bank involved, so there's no bank fraud, who cares?
Yeah, my issue, just trying to think this through, my concern would be the government wouldn't like the fact that sales tax isn't being taken on whatever item is being sold, essentially.
But it's okay. So you're saying that because there's a goat is being transferred
Yeah.
or whatever. Well, in this case, it's coins. Okay.
Yeah.
So the coins are being like transferred ownership. That means that they were sold and bought. But I don't think so because they're included in the value of the home, which is getting taxed. So I think you're wrong. I don't think that's right.
And here's the thing, it's so messy that I would be scared to death. And this is why I'm extremely grateful for good title companies. And this is why you need a title company, because I would have no idea. It just sounds wrong to me.
No, it's not. Dave, is it? Who's right?
Okay. The referee, I guess. I need my whistle here to break it up between the two of you. Yeah. So, you guys both hit on some very good points. The main thing for the government is they want to make sure that they're getting their cut. As long as, from a title company standpoint, let me preface this with this. This has to be a cash transaction. You're not able to trade goats, rare coin collections, or anything else when it comes to being a deal when you have a lender involved, because there needs to be a money paper trail. As a title company standpoint, on a cash transaction, we have a little bit more leeway when it comes to what we can handle. In this case, we would be able to accept the rare coin as partial payment. Now, us as a title company, we would not be involved with the transfer of the coins through typical escrow. But essentially what we would do is we would treat those rare coins as kind of personal property that would be credited and debited from the buyer and the seller. As long as the sales price does not change, however they receive payment, that's what the government is concerned about, that the sales price of the house was, $180,000, and how they got their 180, that's kind of, up to them. So we would show that on our settlement statement. We wouldn't use a traditional, HUD statement. We'd use the old school, or the CD. We would use the old school HUD settlement statement, and we would show a $10,000 credit or whatever for a rare coin collection that's going between the two of you. You know, again, as a title company, we wouldn't be handling that in escrow. That would be
Like
kind
you're
of
not gonna collect the coin
Right.
and then pass it out.
Right.
So let me
any
ask
dollar
you.
amount that we receive has to be in the form of a wire transfer because of the Ohio Good Funds Law. So again, we wouldn't be able to sit there and convert your Bitcoins or your rare coin collections or your prize goats. We're not in that business. But you know, as far as the wire, you know, the funds, the cash, the actual cash has to be in the form of a wire transfer. So,
But I think that's TJ's point. So how would then be, so the personal, you're saying you would convert it to personal property. The personal property would be accounted for, reducing what's due at closing in the wire transfer.
the buyer and the seller would have to agree that that rare coin collection is worth a certain dollar amount, and they both agree that this is accounted for in $10,000, and we would call it in dollar form. We wouldn't say, you know, rare coin collection equity. We would say $10,000 worth of rare coin collection, you know, and it would just be a credit and a debit, kind of like how when earnest money, if a seller is holding earnest money or something, you know, it's we don't actually collect that money. If the seller is holding it, we just reduce their, you know, their how much
Do
money.
you require proof?
So as a title company, we don't typically care on a cash transaction, you know, as long as everybody's agreeing to that they've been paid. You know, you can even use a title company and not use our escrow services as well, you know. So it's like whatever they're doing, you know, between the buyer and the seller, as long as they're agreeing on this is the sales price and this is what we're going to report as the sales price to all the government officials, whether it's the IRS with the 1099 at the end of the year, or with down at the county when they're transferring the property. As long as the value is stated, and that, you know, there's no funny business going on, you know, we're good with it.
Right. So let's say, so that would be then the same with, like, let's say it was Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever.
Yeah.
You would
So
still treat it the same.
Yeah. So what the thing is about Bitcoin, and we haven't actually done a deal with Bitcoin, but what I have heard in different markets, I know there's been some Bitcoin deals down in Miami and some other countries or other parts of the country.
And Miami is another country.
Yeah, is what they do is at the time of the closing, they pick a time and then they convert their Bitcoin to dollars and do their transaction really with dollars. But they agree that it's based on, you know, this is how many Bitcoins it would be.
But that's only because you can't really, TJ, can you, I guess, like if we're buying and selling, can we transfer the Bitcoin between us without selling it?
Yeah. I
like
mean,
without liquidating it?
Yeah. I could send you Bitcoin. Yeah. But it gets messy in real estate contracts because of its volatility and price, I think is the big issue.
If the title company is not involved with the escrow part of it, you know, and there's no mortgages that need to be paid off, you know, my question would be, as a title company standpoint, is, you know, we pay the property taxes and the transfer tax via escrow, so we would need some sort of dollars. Now, how you get to those dollars, you know, you guys could, you know, buyer to seller could transfer their Bitcoins back and forth, and then the only thing that we are escrowing is the taxes and the transfer and that good stuff. I could see that possibly, but you know, TJ is the one that's more familiar with how you would transfer Bitcoins back and forth between people.
But if you could, like TJ said, you can transfer it, so you wouldn't have to liquidate it, because if I'm accepting Bitcoin as payment, I wouldn't want TJ necessarily to liquidate it because it costs him money to do that. And then it would cost me money to buy it again. I'd rather just have it transfer if we agree on the value.
Right. That's all about value. It's the same thing with the coin collection or, you know, Bitcoin that really does have a value that you can look up right now on Google how much Bitcoin's worth, you know, but like TJ said, it's like the volatility of Bitcoin is the difficult, because like I said, it changes minute by minute. I bet the Bitcoin price is different right now than it was when we started this call.
100%.
So how do you determine when the Bitcoin transaction takes place? And
it's the risk, right? Because it's like you have to, no matter if you're selling, I mean, cash USD changes too, right? Or like if people are converting and they're in euros and then they're buying something with dollars, like all of that changes. So it's a time.
But Yeah, but here in the United States, we primarily use the dollar. You know what I mean? Like it's the kind of the reserve currency. I
Yeah.
think kind of the difference with, like I said, like if you were doing a transaction abroad, I maybe Bitcoin would be a better solution rather than converting dollars to euros or euros to yen or whatever it would be.
Yeah, and I think Dave made a good point. Like, and even with crypto, like $10,000 worth of, as long as dollars are the basis. So, $100,000 worth of Bitcoin or worth of coin collection,
Right.
as long as we've got that basis that it's dollars. I'm actually really surprised by this. I think my last piece of the puzzle that I want to ask about, because I'm curious, would this be something that's written directly into the real estate contract, Jennifer, or would the personal property be on a separate piece of
It
the
seems
puzzle?
to me that it's on an addendum, because my thought process was exactly what your guys's was. What is it actually worth? And what time and day is it worth that? And when are we closing? So let's say we're closing tomorrow. As the seller wants the most recent value of whatever, of the goat, of the Bitcoin, whatever it is, right?
Right.
So it's like, okay, we want to agree upon that value as close to closing as possible. And I think that it gets written up on an addendum to the contract so that there's a record that there's an agreement. Do you think that sounds right?
I think, like TJ said, to his point, it's like you have to assign. It's still going to be done in dollars, in the sense that I need
It would
$100
be.
worth of Bitcoin to be transferred at this time. My question would be, is if say, okay, I'm only going to take payments in Bitcoin. What happens if Bitcoin goes like it drops? Now, does that person have enough Bitcoins to cover the 100 grand now?
That's
You know what I
why
mean?
I'm saying it has to be like an agreed upon day and time. So let's say we're closing at noon tomorrow.
Right.
Depending on the timing that everybody needs, like let's say the title company needs 3 days, okay? Then the seller is taking a 3-day risk of that going down, but maybe they agree, right? Like who cares? Like if they agree, they agree.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want 4 goats. Well, the value of your 4, or but you're right. What if a goat dies? Then the deal
Right.
is off. If you
Yeah.
don't have 4 goats or the equivalent cash we assign to the goat, then we don't close.
Yeah. The last piece, I would think the purchase price in the contract has got to match
Yes.
everything else. So that being
Otherwise, it's fraud.
right. And that being on an addendum and not in the contract, I could see that. Also, I'm just thinking about all the things that make people uncomfortable.
It doesn't change the purchase price though, because the agreement of the value is there, and it's either there at closing or it's not there.
Okay.
You have the purchase price is $100,000. Do I have $100,000 regardless if it's made up of a boat in a whatever or cash? Or what I hear is, as long as you have enough, as long as the people in the transaction that require payment in USD are actually getting USD, then the rest of it can be in boats.
I think that's the main thing that I think we're all kind of hitting on, is the fact that like the deal isn't really done in Bitcoin. The deal is really done in dollars.
It's done in
whatever
dollars.
However much, like you said, whatever value you assign to whatever it is. But the bottom line is it always comes back to the dollar. And what is, how do you get a dollar, is kind of the.
You can get it. Well, we do it all the time with rent, furnished property. It's
Right.
this price furnished, it's this price unfurnished. All we're saying is the furnishings are a coin or a goat or a yacht or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Good point.
Find some goat houses. All this talk.
I do think this really does bring up a big point, but like the title companies, the people that you work with are so important, because, and Jen, you're going to see 95% of agents, title companies are just going to be like, this is not, no, this is not normal, but you need people that are willing to be like, hey, we can solve this legally, right? That's important. But this is the kind of stuff, I hope agents watch this and think like, hey, this is something we can have in our tool belt.
Well, it's gonna happen more and more, right? Like people,
Yep.
there are some people that prefer to barter and trade. And it's not a problem.
Right. I think, yeah, exactly. You need to be working with people that can think outside the box, because things are changing and things are changing fast.
Yes.
And if you're just stuck in your ways and saying, this is how we write a contract, this is how we, you're going to get left behind, and, you don't want to be a dinosaur.
Well, right. But I also think that this is a real life situation with the client. It's like they want to buy a property and they want to pay it in a couple of different ways. And my thinking was like, as long as the people that need to collect in USD are getting, as long as a portion of it is in USD, if the seller and the buyer agreed to trade in whatever else, a combine or who cares? As long as everybody agrees to the value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm with you. I learned something today, kids.
This was a very productive talk, I think.
Good.
Always trying to think of some way around something,
You get into some messy freaking snake pits, Marilyn.
To me, it's easy though. It's like, do you agree? Do you agree? Great. Let's do this. There's no problem.
Yeah, and then you got to find somebody to execute it. That's the hard part.
Yeah, well, then we'll check. Yeah, but I agree with you, TJ, as long as it's legal. So the point here is that the purchase price has to be the full amount. It can't be the full amount less the personal property, because that feels like tax fraud. And I believe that it is. Yes. So.
Yeah.
Seems it to me. Yeah.
Don't commit tax fraud.
Everything has to be done by the book. And again, that's why, it's important to, again, work with the right people that can guide you through that, and sit there and say, hey, stay away from this, or you can do this, and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, it's important to ask our clients questions, like, what is it that you really want? What's going on? Why do you want to do it that way? Could you, to your point, TJ, could you just sell it? And that makes it kind of easier. Why do you not want to sell? It takes us asking questions to really dive into what is the problem they're trying to solve? But ultimately, if the buyer and seller agree, then you're good, mostly.
Yeah. And I think it's important, ignorance is not a defense, right? So
yep.
If you don't know and you commit tax fraud, that's still tax fraud. So,
right.
Asking these questions like Jen did, she didn't just guess, she brought this to people that are smarter than us, which is Dave,
right.
and got the right answer. That there's a lesson there, I think, for all of us.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys. Hey Dave, where do you do business? Where do you do title business?
Yeah. So we're located here in Ohio, but we cover all the surrounding states. We're in Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota.
Nice. And what's the best way to reach you?
Best way to reach out to us is via our website, fidelitylandtitle.com.
TJ, if people want to be in our world, work with us, think bigger, make real estate fun and interesting.
Yeah.
How can they get a hold of us?
Yeah, call or text 513-379-2000. I would love some new energy of people that are doing that, 6-8 million and want to do 20 to 30 million.
Yeah,
let's help. I'm down.
Let's do it. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right, bye.